Welcome to Chapter 2 of HIPAA Security Rule. In this chapter, you will learn about the HIPAA Security Rule Administrative Safeguards. Administrative safeguards under the HIPAA Security Rule involve developing and implementing processes, policies, and procedures that will work best in protecting against unwanted breach and unwanted disclosure of sensitive health information. The administrative safeguards contains the following 9 standards: security management process, assigned security responsibility, workforce security, information access management, security awareness and training, security incident procedures, contingency plan, evaluation, business associate contracts. Some examples of administrative safeguards can be employee training on security and awareness, written policies and procedures, incident response plans, business associate agreements, and background checks. Security management process. This standard involves implementing policies and procedures for detecting, preventing, containing, and correcting security violations through the following 4 stages. Risk analysis. This includes conducting an accurate and thorough assessment of the potential risks and vulnerabilities to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of EPHI. Risk management. This includes implementing security measures sufficient to reduce risks and vulnerabilities to a reasonable and appropriate level. Sanction policy. This includes applying appropriate sanctions against workforce members who fail to comply with the security policies and procedures. Information system activity review. This includes implementing procedures to regularly review records of information system activity, such as audit logs, access reports, and security incident tracking reports. It is to be noted that the sanction policy and every risk analysis conducted must be documented and retained for at least 6 years and should be periodically reviewed and updated as required. Assigned security responsibilities. The Assigned Security Responsibility Standard requires organizations to assign security responsibilities to an individual for the development of security policies and procedures. Large organizations may have multiple people managing security or an entire dedicated team because they have multiple locations. In smaller organizations, the privacy and security officer's role may be assigned to a single individual. However, it is not necessary to hire someone from outside the organization, as it can be a qualified individual from within the organization. As an example, head of IT could be a perfect person for this role. Workforce security. This standard involves determining which employees are authorized to access EPHI so that they can perform their job functions properly. This is where termination procedures must be taken into account. For instance, deactivating passwords or access codes after an employee who had access to EPHI has been terminated. Implementation specifications include authorization and/or supervision. This includes implementing procedures for the authorization and/or supervision of workforce members who work with electronic protected health information or in locations where it might be accessed. Workforce clearance procedure includes implementing procedures to determine that the access of a workforce member to EPHI is appropriate. Termination procedure is implementing procedures for terminating access to electronic protected health information when the employment of a workforce member ends. It is to be noted that clearance does not encompass a blanket requirement for background checks or other security appraisals before granting access to PHI. Clearance means that access will be conditioned by assessing job responsibilities, the amount and type of supervision, and so on. Information access management. This standard refers to the level of authorization access to any EPHI, particularly how access is restricted to authorized individuals only. In simpler terms, when such access is appropriate based on the user's or recipient's role. The implementation specifications include isolating healthcare clearinghouse functions, access authorization, access establishment and modification. Isolating healthcare clearinghouse functions. If a healthcare clearinghouse is a part of a larger organization, the clearinghouse must implement policies and procedures that protect the EPHI from unauthorized access by larger organizations. Access authorization. Policies and procedures for granting access to EPHI. In general, policies and procedures must identify who has authority to grant access privileges, access establishment and modification. Organizations must implement and manage the creation and modification of access privileges to workstations, transactions, programs, and/or processes. It is to be noted that organizations that are part of other organizations that utilizes the same corporate information technology infrastructure must take steps to protect its EPHI from unsanctioned access by individuals working in other departments or functions. How to develop different levels of information access. Limit access rights to the minimum necessity. Define types of users, roles, and access levels. Authenticate the identity of individuals that attempt to access information. Institute guidelines for when access rights should be changed. Access rights should never be allowed to be transferred among users. Distribute the policies to all individuals that has access to EPHI. Policies and procedures should be reviewed annually. Let's do a case study on information access management. Jack and Jill are both colleagues and work at a medical billing agency. While Jack's responsibilities are directly related to patient billing, Jill only has to handle internal administrative functions. During a weekly meeting, Adam, the administrative, informed them that they would have to have different levels of access to patient electronic health information because of HIPAA. Is the decision to have different levels of access to health information made by Adam correct? Access to EPHI should be granted to those individuals who require legitimate access to perform their job functions properly. In simple words, employees who can perform their jobs without access to EPHI should not be able to view personal health information. In this case, since Jack requires access to EPHI to perform his job and Jill does not, Jack should have access to EPHI and Jill should not. Security and awareness training. The Security and Awareness Training Standard requires all the workforce members of an organization, including those in management, undergo training on security policies and procedures. This could include the following: security reminders. This means providing periodical security reminders and updates to supplement initial education. Examples include providing notices in printed or electronic form, internal memo, or posting it in the affected areas like the bulletin board or company's intranet. Protection from malicious software. This means educating the workforce members on procedures for guarding against, detecting, and reporting malicious software. Login monitoring. This means educating the workforce members on procedures for monitoring login attempts and reporting discrepancies. Password management. This includes training your employees on procedures for creating, changing, and safeguarding passwords. It is to be noted that reminders could be email bulletins, newsletters, or posting on bulletin boards or company's intranet. Security incident procedures. This standard requires organizations to implement policies and procedures to address security incidents. By definition, security incidents mean the attempted or successful unauthorized access, use, disclosure, modification, or destruction of information or interference with system operations in an information system. The procedures must address how to identify security incidents and provide that the incident be reported to the appropriate person or persons. Implementation specifications include response and reporting. This implementation specification states that organizations must identify and respond to suspected or known security incidents, mitigate to the extent practicable harmful effects of security incidents that are known to the organization, and document security incidents and their outcomes. Let's do a case study on security incident. Sarah was recently appointed as a HIPAA security officer for X and Y Tech. One of her responsibilities was to develop a security incident procedure. Sarah created a list of what constitutes a security incident as well as a form for reporting incidents. What should Sarah do with the reports of security incidents once they have been filled with her office? When security incident occurs, the security officer and their team should investigate the incident and mitigate to the extent practical any harmful effects of the security incident and document the security incidents and their outcomes. The documentation should be retained for at least 6 years. It may also require the officer to notify the Department of Health and Human Services if the breach affects a large number of people. Contingency plan. The contingency plan standard requires organizations to establish policies and procedures for responding to an emergency or other occurrences that damages systems that contain electronic protected health information. Implementation specifications include data backup plan, disaster recovery plan, emergency mode operation plan, testing and revision procedures, application and data criticality analysis. The data backup plan means establishing and implementing procedures to create and maintain retrievable exact copies of ePHI. Disaster recovery plan means establishing procedure to restore any loss of data. Emergency operation plan is establishing procedures to enable continuation of critical business processes for protection of the security of electronic protected health information while operating in emergency mode. Testing and revision procedures means implementing procedures for periodic testing and revision of contingency plans. Application and data criticality analysis means assessing the relative criticality of specific applications and data in support of other contingency plan components. It is to be noted that data backups should be kept in a place or off-site where it cannot be affected by fire, flood, or other natural disasters. Let's do a case study on contingency plans. Julia is the office manager for a private hospital. The hospital's IT group has a policy and procedure to back up all the servers each night and store the tapes off-site. Julia is curious about whether the IT group's policies and procedures will satisfy the security rules data backup plan implementation standard. What advice should you give to Julia as our HIPAA security consultant? The IT group's backup policy and procedures will satisfy the implementation specification for a data backup plan. Backups should be maintained off-site until the information is needed for restoration purposes. Evaluation. The evaluation standard requires organizations to perform technical and non-technical evaluations to review and maintain reasonable and appropriate security measures to comply with the security rule. The purpose of the standard is to know if the security plans and procedures implemented continue to adequately protect the ePHI. There are no separate implementation specifications for the standard. However, organizations must verify compliance with the HIPAA security rule, confirm that the required policies and procedures have been developed, substantiate that the members of the workforce have been trained, confirm that contingency plans have been established, verify that adequate access rights have been established, review computer systems and network designs periodically to ensure proper security is in place. Business associate contracts and other arrangements. The standard requires organizations to execute contracts with vendors and subcontractors that create, receive, maintain, or transmit ePHI on the organization's behalf to ensure that they will appropriately safeguard the information. The standard has only one implementation specification: written contract or other arrangements. This means executing a written contract or other arrangement specifying how ePHI should be handled and safeguarded when it has to be shared with another entity. However, it is not required to execute business associate contracts between covered entities or between a health plan sponsor and a health plan. It is to be noted that these contracts will provide the legal framework for maintaining consistent levels of data integrity and confidentiality. An organization may modify existing confidential agreements with business associates or renegotiate or create new agreements. Let's do a case study on business associate contracts. A screening test center subcontracts its billing and collections to a third-party medical billing and collections agency. What should the screening center do to ensure patients' health information is protected? The screening center must enter into a business associate contract with a third-party agency before sharing PHI with them, in this case, the medical billing and collection agency. It is required by HIPAA that the center perform some due diligence to ensure that the business associate is actually HIPAA compliant. The center could do this over the phone by asking the business associate a few simple questions, such as do they provide HIPAA awareness training to their staff? Do they have a compliance officer? Do they have a compliance binder for both HIPAA privacy and security that could be inspected? Finally, the center will have to make the third-party agency legally responsible for the PHI they receive by having them sign a business associate agreement. Both the parties, the organization and the third party, is then required to keep that agreement in their HIPAA compliance documentation. Required versus addressable. Unlike the required specifications, rules that are itemized as addressable are slightly different and offer more flexibility. These are not, however, optional. Covered entities and business associates must fully understand this. While often being technical, addressable specifications allow organizations the flexibility to use discretion and implement various security measures to accomplish the objectives of the requirements. As an example, if you were given addressable specifications to surprise and present someone with a birthday cake, you can either make it yourself or buy one from a store. It doesn't matter as long as the person receives the gift. Each organization must assess whether an addressable implementation specification is appropriate and reasonable for their practice. It is to be noted that for each addressable specification not implemented, organizations must describe and fully document why they chose to either not implement them, use a different method, or implement a partial solution. You've successfully reached the end of Chapter 2. Congratulations! In the upcoming chapters, you'll be learning the physical safeguards, technical safeguards, and how to become HIPAA security compliant.